Intensifying screens. The contents of this topic are learning objectives, introduction, functions, composition, advantages and disadvantages, and lastly the summary. Learning objectives. At the end of this topic, we will get to learn what are intensifying screens, what are functions of intensifying screens, what is the composition of intensifying screens, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of intensifying screens. Introduction. The extraoral projections used most frequently in dentistry are the panoramic, cephalometric, and other skull views. For these projections and for virtually all other extraoral radiography, screen film is used with intensifying screens to reduce patient exposure. The intensifying screens absorb X-rays and emit visible light, which exposes the screen film. Early in the history of radiography, scientists discovered that various inorganic salts or phosphors fluoresce, that is, they emit visible light, when exposed to an X-ray beam. The intensity of this fluorescence is proportional to the X-ray energy absorbed. These phosphors have been incorporated into intensifying screens for use with screen film. The sum of the effects of the X-rays and the visible light emitted by the screen phosphors exposes the film in an intensifying cassette. Functions. The presence of intensifying screens creates an image receptor system that is 10 to 60 times more sensitive to X-rays than the film alone. Consequently, use of intensifying screens means a substantial reduction in the dose of X-radiation to which the patient is exposed. Intensifying screens are used with films for virtually all extraoral radiography, including panoramic, cephalometric, and skull projections. In general, the resolving power of screens is related to their speed. That is, the slower the speed of a screen, the greater its resolving power, and vice versa. Intensifying screens are not used intraorally with periapical or occlusal films because their use would reduce the resolution of the resulting image below that necessary for diagnosis of much dental disease. Composition. Intensifying screens are made of a base supporting material, a phosphor layer, and a protective polymeric coat. In all dental applications, intensifying screens are used in pairs, one on each side of the film, and they are positioned inside a cassette. As we can see in this diagram, which is showing a schematic representation of two intensifying screens, which are shown in different shades of gray, enclosing a film, which is shown in white color. The detailed view on the right is showing the X-ray photon which is entering at the top and it is traveling through the base and is striking the phosphors in the base. The phosphors is emitting visible light and thus it exposes the film. Some visible light photons may reflect off the reflecting layer of the base. The purpose of a cassette is to hold each intensifying screen in contact with the X-ray film to maximize the sharpness of the image. Most cassettes are rigid, but they may be flexible. This is the diagram showing cassette for 8 by 10-inch film. When the cassette is closed, the film is supported in close contact between two intensifying screens. Base. The base material of most intensifying screens is some form of polyester plastic that is about 0.25 mm thick. It provides mechanical support for the other layers. In some intensifying screens, the base also is reflective. Thus, it reflects light emitted from the phosphor layer back towards the X-ray film. We can appreciate the base in this diagram, which is shown in slightly dark shade of gray. The reflective base has the effect of increasing the light emission of the intensifying screen. However, it also results in some image unsharpness because of the divergence of light rays reflected back to the film. Some fine detail intensifying screens omit the reflecting layer to improve image sharpness. In other intensifying screens, the base is not reflective and a separate coating of titanium dioxide is applied to the base material to serve as a reflecting layer. Second one is the phosphor layer. The phosphor layer is composed of phosphorescent crystals suspended in a polymeric binder. When the crystals absorb X-ray photons, they fluoresce. The phosphor crystals often contain rare earth elements, most commonly lanthanum and gadolinium. We can easily appreciate the phosphor layer, which is just below the base and is denoted by a slight light gray shade. The fluorescence of the phosphor crystals can be increased by the addition of small amounts of elements such as thulium, niobium, or terbium. For example, light emission from Kodak Lenix rare earth intensifying screens ranges from 375 to 600 nanometer and peaks sharply at 545 nanometer, which emits green light. Other intensifying screens have a major peak at 350 nanometer, which emits UV light, and another at 450 nanometer, which emits blue light. It is important to match green emitting screens with green sensitive films and blue emitting screens with blue sensitive films. This is the table showing rare earth elements which are commonly used in intensifying screens. The phosphor crystals like gadolinium oxysulfide and terbium activated phosphor crystals emits green light, whereas yttrium tantalite and niobium activated phosphor crystals emits blue and UV light. The speed and resolution of a screen depends on many factors including the following: phosphor type and phosphor conversion efficiency, thickness of phosphor layer and coating weight, that is amount of phosphor per unit volume, presence of reflective layer, presence of light absorbing dye in phosphor binder or protective coating, and phosphor grain size. The third one is the protective coat. A protective polymer coat up to 15 micrometer thick is placed over the phosphor layer to protect the phosphor and to provide a surface that can be cleaned. We can appreciate a protective coat which can be seen placed just over the phosphor layer. The intensifying screens should be kept clean because any debris, spots or scratches may cause light spots on the resultant radiograph. Advantages and disadvantages of intensifying screen. The advantages of intensifying screens is that they reduce patient exposure and increase X-ray tube life. And the disadvantage of intensifying screen is that they have lower spatial resolution due to light spread. Summary. So from this topic, we can summarize at the end that intensifying screen is a device that converts X-rays to visible light. It is made of a base supporting material, a phosphor layer, and a protective polymeric coat. It can be used with films for virtually all extraoral radiography, including panoramic, cephalometric, and skull projections, but cannot be used intraorally with periapical or occlusal films. It reduces patient exposure but introduces screen unsharpness. Thank you.